Coffee. It's part of our daily ritual. And one company has changed the way we drink it.
It was new, it was exciting, and it took the world by storm.
Turning the humble coffee bean into a $22 billion empire.
Starbucks is one of these brands that people love to hate, but keep going to anyway.
This is a story of how Starbucks conquered the world, but then lost its way.
It became almost like a fast food business, kind of lost their charm a little bit.
The perception that they were the big bad corporate beings still stuck with them.
And how the man who made it great had to return.
You know, we convinced ourselves that a new flavor of Frappuccino was innovation, and that's not innovation.
To re-energize the Starbucks brand one cup at a time. In today's world, seemingly no one can live without their extra shot skinny caramel latte.
If I go to Starbucks, I would order a Frappuccino.
I always go for an organic fair trade coffee.
It's actually not coffee, it's the green tea latte from Starbucks. It's actually the one I'm holding right now.
The average person spends $1,000 a year getting their caffeine fix, and no one sells more coffee in more countries than Starbucks. Opening a store every 15 hours, they're showing no signs of slowing up.
If this was a 20-chapter book, we're in chapter 4 and 5. We are just getting started.
But the Starbucks story didn't always make for easy reading. Bad coffee and a thirst for expansion plunged the brand into a rapid decline. So how did Starbucks reinvent themselves? It all started in Seattle in 1971. The city, renowned for its relaxed atmosphere and hippie culture, was about to give birth to a company that would shake up the coffee industry as we knew it.
When they began, it was this coffee roasting shop. 3 young men were behind it who were obsessive about coffee. And they wanted to do it in a way that suited their own hippie-ish lifestyles. And they were from Seattle, which has its own very laid-back vibe about it in American terms.
These 3 hipsters, Gordon Bowker, Zev Siegel and Jerry Baldwin, named their company after a character from Moby Dick, first mate Starbuck. And a twin-tailed mermaid became the image of their company. But their real prize catch was the appointment of Howard Schultz as Director of Marketing in 1982. John Simmons interviewed Schultz for his book on Starbucks.
Howard comes from a pretty ordinary family. He was the first person in his family who would have any form of higher education. And he was doing pretty well from his family's point of view when he came to take this extraordinary risk by going into this unknown company. But he was determined to do it. He was determined it was the right thing. And I think that is an important element in his character.
At only 29 years old, Schultz had big ambitions for the company, even if he didn't always see eye to eye with the founders.
It was really a coffee retail place. They sold coffee, tea, and spices. The other founders did not agree with the vision because they wanted to remain a roaster. So they wanted to remain in the we sell high-end coffee to discerning consumers and not we go into making coffee.
At first, Starbucks only sold coffee beans and roasting equipment for home brewing. But that all changed in 1987 when Schultz bought out the 3 founders and gained full control of the company. His direction for the future was inspired by a trip to Italy.
That dream, in many ways, started with my first trip as a young man when I came to Milan for the first time in 1983. And I was captured emotionally by the Italian coffee bar, the sense of community, the third place between home and work. And I raced back to America thinking, this is what I'd like to try and do and transform the Italian coffee experience into the American society.
Returning inspired, he introduced the word cafe latte into the American vocabulary for the very first time. And it was a completely different drink to anything coffee lovers were used to.
This is something where there was no competition. It was new, it was exciting, and it took the world by storm. So when Starbucks started, they really brought something very European into the US market.
But it wasn't just the coffee that captivated us. It was the artistry and craftsmanship behind each cup.
People stopping at a Starbucks was almost like a selfish act of self-love, indulgence. They would go in and buy themselves this relatively expensive coffee, and they felt like they treated themselves on the way to the office.
The sound of the coffee machine, the steam, and the length of time that it took.
And then on top of this, the friendly baristas, right? There was a bit of personalization there. You come to the same barista every day, and personal bonds were formed.
Crafting this new coffee experience, Schultz's management style was bold and unwavering.
That entrepreneurial flame lives in Howard Schultz very strongly. Perfectionist, sometimes very headstrong, it's my way or the highway kind of approach. It took Schultz years to accept skimmed milk in the coffee shops because he thought that ruined quality.
By the mid-90s, Starbucks had over 1,000 stores across America. They were ready to go international, arriving first in Japan, then soon after in Singapore. Suhaimi Sukiman now runs his own independent roastery, but his love for coffee all started when a new company came to town.
I came across this hiring ad that says that we are hiring. Logo is in green. We walk in, fill up the application form, and the next thing you know, we got a job. The company is Starbucks. Honestly, I wasn't a coffee drinker. I couldn't tell the difference between an espresso or latte. It was a place that I felt like home. It grew on me because it is a slogan of a third place, another place or a home away from home.
Dubbed the third place, now the coffee shop, not just the home or the office, became an important space in people's daily lives.
It was a phenomenal success. His whole idea was when you're at home, you have a family identity. When you're at work, you have a company identity. And I want to give you a third place in between those two where you can just sit back, relax, be yourself, chat. And that was the home away from home, that third place.
Well, there would be recognizable elements about the space that made it seem like home. So the furniture, for example, would be settees and comfortable armchairs.
The feeling of comfort kind of contribute to the feeling that you are actually in a place that you know very well. Although that could be the first Starbucks store that you visit in that area. I think that sense of consistency kind of gives you a feeling that, hey, you are at home.
The whole idea of sitting down somewhere, having a 10-15-minute break between work or meetings or over lunch, after people come to work, they just hang out, they sit on a chair outside somewhere in the sun or inside a cafe in winter and chill out for a short period of time.
Schultz's third place became ingrained into American culture.
You can still use the copy machine where I actually work, but just come by at lunch.
Our favourite characters from American hit comedy series Friends made it seem cool, if not completely productive, to while away hours in the local coffee shop.
Or maybe it's because you're all hanging around here at 11:30 on a Wednesday. Yeah, let's head off to work.
The whole of the world now socialised, gossiped or struck business deals in the armchairs of Starbucks. And they also spoke the language.
Starbuckian refers to a lot of different things. It's everything from saying I want a venti, which, you know, if you don't go to a Starbucks, you have no idea what that is. Okay, that's the size of coffee cup. So there was that sense of you and I are part of the same club because we both know what a venti is. Then there was that introduction of all the Italian-sounding words, which went back to Schultz's love for Italian coffee shops. So the cappuccino, even the Americano, the latte, and so on, all these words that we now refer to as if they were completely natural in our coffee terminology, create a vocabulary that brought people together, was a brilliant move.
Starbucks was more than a business. It was a new place. It was a lifestyle. It was a language. Parodied affectionately in hit movies like Zoolander.
Know what could really help you sort through these important issues?
What?
Orange mocha frappuccino!
And all this boiled down to one thing: sky-high profits. On the average $3 small latte, the company is making about 50 cents profit for every cup they sell. But size matters. The real money lies in the supersized drinks. A large latte with extra toppings. The cost of the raw materials, packaging, store overheads and taxes have increased slightly. With the price tag soaring to an average of $4.30, their profit margin has almost tripled to around $1.40 per cup.
What is branding all about? It is being able to sell a coffee for a couple of dollars rather than for 50 cents. You've convinced people that it's worth paying that extra because you're paying for more than just simply the product.
In 2000, Schultz announced record sales of over $2 billion US. But the company would have to enter the new millennium without their visionary at the helm. Later that year, Schultz decided to step down as CEO and take a more hands-off position in the boardroom. In his book, he stated that after 14 years of growing the company as CEO, his heart was no longer in it and he needed a new challenge. He'd left the company in a strong financial position, but under the new management, Starbucks' strategy would change drastically.
They'd made a number of appointments that were not the right kinds of people. People who were too much driven by the finance rather than really having a deep understanding of the culture of the brand.
Over the next decade, Starbucks embarked on a relentless quest for expansion, stretching their brand so thin it was at breaking point.
After Howard Schultz, the key drive was growth. Growth in stores, growth in sales, growth in earnings. And I think the original culture was a little bit secondary during that growth phase. You couldn't move from a few hundred shops to a few thousand shops to over 20,000 shops without losing something. And this is what many critics criticized. You lost your soul in this journey.
Throughout the early 2000s, Starbucks underwent a period of incredible expansion, the company's revenue doubling every 3 years. They sold a coffee experience to the world, and the world lapped it up.
The economy was just foaming. It was so hot. So people were busy, people had a lot of money, people drank a lot of coffee. And Starbucks used this to really grow rapidly.
But the spike in profits came at the expense of their brand, as people began to get tired of the iconic mermaid logo popping up everywhere.
Starbucks' expansion strategy was always one of saturation. So you go into a city and you saturate it.
Well, there was a perception that there was a Starbucks on every corner. There was no doubt an element of, well, we got a bit tired of this, you know, whereas before it had been something new and fresh and exciting. Well, we became a lot more familiar with it.
Whereas before, American popular culture embraced the third place, now Starbucks and their expansion strategy was mocked. As captured here in the ever-perceptive Simpsons.
Can I help you?
I'd like to get my ear pierced.
Well, better make it quick, kiddo. In 5 minutes, this place is becoming a Starbucks.
Expansion was too fast. It was too focused on driving sales, on growing fast, and not somehow on the original value proposition. So the original value proposition, very often you sit in that bar and have a cup of coffee. But of course, real estate is expensive. I make a lot more money if you buy and take away. So if you push too much on takeaway, again, what's left of the Starbucks experience?
The management had sacrificed the Starbucks experience in favour of increased sales and expansion.
People didn't feel special going to a Starbucks anymore. The saturation, increasing competition, loss of the touch with the consumer, automated machines, which kind of made it feel less special as well.
The baristas on the shop floor were now ordered to prioritise speed of service, and to help them churn out more cappuccinos, Starbucks ditched the traditional coffee machine and went fully automatic.
Thank you, have a nice day.
When I first got started with Starbucks in 1998, we were all using a semi-automatic machine. This actually requires a barista to be technically trained. Just before I left the business in 2007, Starbucks moved on to fully automatic machines where coffee is actually extracted by a touch of a button. And I think that kind of killed the romance a little bit about, you know, the art of how coffee is made. It became almost like a fast food business. And I personally feel like it kind of lost the charm a little bit.
All over Asia, Starbucks profits started to stagnate. In Japan, their largest market outside the USA, the company's stock price slumped by over 50% as consumers started turning away from the brand. And after all, they had far better quality options available to them. Although famed for its tea, Japan has one of the richest coffee traditions in Asia. Kissaten coffee shops, like this one in Tokyo, still practice century-old techniques.
すべてうちはハンドドリップですね。マシンは使わないで。
Terazuma Kazuya is the resident coffee master. He's at one with the coffee bean. And he offers his customers a unique experience.
長く30年間やってるんですけど、30年間一度も30年ぐらい通ってる方がいらっしゃるんですけど、ほとんどこう間違いしたことないって被ったことがないっていうカップが。
While Starbucks focused on speed and market dominance, Japanese coffee lovers were favouring the traditional brew.
あんまりゆっくりするイメージがなくて、持ち帰りで飲むか、ちょっとだけ時間ある時に行ってバーって飲んで。
これはね、当店のオリジナルブレンドです。ブラジル、ガテマラをベースにして、今タンザニア、ジャマイカ、どんないい豆でも負の部分、悪い味の部分っていうのを持っていて、美味しい部分だけをこう拾って抽出してあげようという。
Back in the boardrooms of the Seattle HQ, it would appear Schultz was aware that the brand he created was weakening. In 2007, a memo to senior management was leaked, where Schultz warned against further growth.
This memo he wrote wasn't meant for the public. It wasn't meant for the whole of Starbucks. It was meant for the current leadership to rethink their strategy and think again, shouldn't we really slow down and consolidate rather than continue and grow?
But Starbucks management seemingly didn't heed Schultz's warnings. Instead of consolidating their business, they continued to expand their product offerings.
As Starbucks went more into food and also CDs, and it sponsored 2 movies and all of that, it was losing touch with the reasons why people came to Starbucks.
We were all asked to put on badges, you know, encouraging people to make their own drink. And of course, it was painful for the barista, it was painful for those who was taking the order. The queue tend to get a bit more longer when such requests have to be entertained.
If you add in additional flavors, additional machinery, additional products, things that work perfectly fine suddenly don't work anymore. Staff will not perform as much as well as before. They will not be as fast as before. They will not be as knowledgeable as before.
All over the world, the Starbucks empire seemed to have become unwieldy, none more so than the lucrative Chinese market. Here, the American company had recorded losses for 9 consecutive years as they struggled to entice a nation of tea drinkers to buy coffee instead. But it was one particular branch in Beijing's revered Forbidden City that would give the company a PR headache.
You have a tourist destination, large numbers of people going through every single day. On the surface, this looks like a potentially profitable place to place a Starbucks.
Despite the coffee house being open for 7 years, the public perceived the Starbucks brand as an icon of Western globalization imposing itself onto Chinese cultural heritage.
Social media was just starting to take off in China. And what happened is that there was a CCTV newscaster, Ray Chenggang, who went to social media and asked the critical question, would you put a Starbucks in the White House or in Versailles? Obvious answer is no, we would not do that. This became a firestorm very, very quickly.
This was the first time where they really faced cultural resistance to their business model. Global companies like Starbucks, like McDonald's, like Dunkin' Donuts, and so on, are always targeted by anti-globalization movements who say, yes, we're trying to cookie cut and paste a certain model everywhere around the world.
The perception that they were the big bad corporate beings still stuck with them. And there were the globalization protests that were happening at that time. There was a feeling against the big company.
In late 2007, the company's value plummeted by almost 50% as the markets reacted to the weakening brand and the beginning of a global recession. Starbucks' stock price was in freefall, and their brand had gone off the boil. Could anyone rescue the coffee giants, or was it time for the return of Howard Schultz? By 2008, the world's biggest coffee company was in disarray. The management seemed to have confused growth with success, expanding at the expense of the company's core values. Howard Schultz, the man who had built the brand, was enjoying life away from Starbucks, buying the Seattle Supersonics basketball team. But with his beloved Starbucks on the brink of crisis, the temptation to return was too strong.
And I came back on January 7th as CEO of Starbucks because of a word that's not used in business, and it's love. I love this company. I love the people. I feel that we were drifting a little bit towards mediocrity and kind of losing our voice, and I needed to come back. And I came back because I didn't want to be a critic from the sidelines. If I was going to be critical and concerned, I had to get back in the game.
I think he was asked to come back as CEO in 2008, and there was a sense of responsibility. It was his child. Starbucks was his dream.
Howard's presence when he returned to the CEO role simply reinvigorated the company, because you have the original person, you have the person who created the vision, the person who's so good at preaching the Starbucks story and building relationships and getting buy-in. People have confidence in Howard Schultz.
He was the first to confess we went from an entrepreneurial, creative, innovative culture to a mediocre, bureaucratic culture.
Howard Schultz's return had galvanized a global workforce of over 175,000 employees. But his first real move was to freshen up the company's senior management that had grown complacent.
That as companies get big and successful, and this happened to a degree at Starbucks, people get entitled. And success is not an entitlement. You have to earn it. You have to earn it every day, especially in the retail business. And we got to a point, I believe, in the culture and values of our company where we just believe we're Starbucks. We've had 15, 16 years of public life that has been fairly charmed, and this thing's just going to continue because it always has. Well, that's not the case.
彼のプレゼンテーションを聞くと見るとね、聞くっていうかね、目の前で見るとね、本当にね、人を魅了する魔法みたいな感じなんですよ。その話し方であって、話す内容だったりね。
Matsuo Iwata was personally appointed by Schultz as the new CEO of Starbucks Japan after a rather rigorous selection process.
だから半年面接繰り返したんですね。日本でやって、香港行って最後シアトル行って全役員にやって最後ハウスシューツにやって、半年ぐらいかけて面接してスターバックス入ったんですね。もう一回スターバックスのコーヒーの原点、スターバックスのハードシューツが初めてスターバックスのコーヒーを飲んだ時にね、あの感動をもう一回取り戻してもらおうと思ってコーヒーの原点に戻ろうとした。だからバリューの一番目をコーヒーに持ってきたんですね。あの時やっぱりあまりにも人の方コーヒーの味が落ちてたので、もう一回原点に戻ってコーヒーの味を高めようということでバリューの見直しをやったんですね。
Schultz knew he had to bring Starbucks back to its core, a good cup of coffee. And on February the 26th, 2008, he shocked American media by proving that his strategy involved more than just motivational speeches.
Oh, so wherever you are at 5:30 for 3 hours, they're going to shut down Starbucks.
It's a good idea.
Why?
They got to get better. They got to get better. Starbucks has. Here's the problem with Starbucks, Gretchen, is they've expanded so quickly across the country. They've got 4 stores in this block.
Baristas in over 7,000 stores across the USA were told to switch off the automatic machine and were retaught the lost art of brewing coffee.
The guy who's running the company now says, we've got to retrain everybody. So they're going to bring everybody back in today at 5:30 and say, okay, now this is how we make the double espresso mocha latte, okay?
I suspect there was a lot of cynicism about it. It was a dangerous move because it would no doubt lead to a lot of ribaldry. And there was a big danger that Starbucks would just become the laughing stock.
Thing is, will it affect my pumpkin spice latte? Because I got it on Halloween and I never let it go.
So this is all lost sales and lost contributions. It's incredibly expensive. Making such an expensive statement signals urgency to everyone. So everyone says, wow, we are so serious about it.
The stunt cost Starbucks an estimated $6 million in lost sales. But Schultz was banking that the credibility it restored to the brand would be far more valuable.
僕はやっぱすごく大きなことだと思うんですね。かつ前提お店を閉めたってことは本気度を示したことだと思うんですね。それはやっぱハードのような強いリーダーシップ、もちろんね彼でないとできないことだと思いますけどね。それがもう本当に V 字回復スターバックスしていったわけですよね。
I think in the end, what it did was establish that we are serious about this, that we are committed to the quality of the coffee, to the standards that our people will enact with our customers, and that we're not prepared to put up with a service that is anything below the standard that we've set as the benchmark for Starbucks.
Schultz's next move? To cut down product offerings and remove hot food from the cafes. A small change, but a big statement that the company would no longer value stock price and profits over customer experience.
We've taken those things out, or we're taking those things out and replacing it with something else. It may not seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal inside the culture and values of Starbucks because we can't serve 2 masters. You can't serve the master of the customer and the tradition and heritage of the company while trying to satisfy the short-term mentality of Wall Street.
As Schultz tried to rebuild the integrity of the brand, he now needed to address the sheer size of the company. Throughout the last decade, fueled by the economic boom, the company had ballooned to over 16,000 stores worldwide. But in late 2008, the economic climate was changing, and these stores became a massive drain on profits.
Suddenly, Lehman Brothers happened. This whole thing came to a stop. A lot of people lost their jobs in the cities, in the big cities. Money wasn't so easy anymore. And growth that already became a bit marginal for Starbucks suddenly turned negative. So the new shops that were opened already had lower revenue per square foot than the earlier shops. New shops started to cannibalize existing shops, and suddenly the growth was gone, and actually the opposite happened. There was a contraction.
ただリーマンショックがちょっと業績悪くなったので、なんとなくみんなの気持ちが目先の業績の方に行ってたと。
Schultz closed 600 stores in the US alone. 70% of them had only been open for less than 3 years. And Starbucks made more than 12,000 employees redundant, the most in their history.
The battle cry in the company today is, how do you get this big and stay small? And the way you do it is one customer, one partner, one cup of coffee at a time, reducing it to the lowest common denominator and focusing maniacally on the customer experience.
で、そこからいろんな改革をしていったんですが、やっぱ最初の半年間はずっと売り上げを落ち続けました。ですごいプレッシャーきました。後ろがね、弾飛んでくる感じなんですね。もうすごいプレッシャーきて、もう社内外から来ましたけど。
In Japan, Iwata set about implementing Schultz's vision. To do this, he took inspiration from the coffee masters at the traditional Japanese kisatens.
地域の一番手の喫茶店っていうのがありますよね。そういう人たちはやっぱりマスター、オーナーさんとお客さんのつながりが非常に強いですよね。店長さんに、オーナー意識、つまり自分があたかも経営者のような気持ちになってほしいっていうことをね、そういうことはよく言ってましたし、それからそういう権限もね、与えてあげないといけないと。ある程度その、お店の人たちが自分たちでできるようなこと、こういうのを裁量でできるっていうんですかね、エンパワーメントっていうんですかね、そういうことは意識したつもりでいるわけですね。
In May 2010, sales in Japan hit a record $1 billion as consumers responded to the more personalized feel of the stores. It was a lesson in localism that Starbucks would implement in other markets across Asia. And there was one territory left to crack: the fastest growing market of coffee drinkers in the world, China. The return of Starbucks visionary Howard Schultz had stabilized the brand, but to grow further, he eyed success in one particular market.
With 3,200 stores in China, we're opening a new store every single day in China, and I've said publicly that our China business will be bigger than the US business when we're all said and done.
Chinese coffee consumption is growing by 15% every year. But for the last decade, Starbucks had been unable to translate this into hard profits. The PR disaster at the Forbidden City may have left Starbucks with a bitter taste in their mouths. And now, to succeed, they would have to employ a more culturally sensitive approach.
For a short period, Starbucks symbolized within China a foreign company that did not understand the culture, did not appreciate what the culture values, and they had to go about reshaping that. And they've done that very, very well by working with communities, by working with parents, by being a great employer, by partnering with Alibaba and creating the kinds of experiences that are valued.
In May 2018, in an extravagant ceremony, Starbucks announced a high-profile deal with Jack Ma's Alibaba. Alibaba would operate a mobile e-payment system and delivery service exclusively for Starbucks coffee. It was a partnership in line with Starbucks' strategy to engage and adapt to local needs.
They would get the community involved in the design and the delivery of the Starbucks experience. Why guess when you can just go ask people directly, if you came here for coffee, what kind of experience would you like?
Starbucks showed how serious they were about long-term success in China by opening a 30,000 square foot roastery in Shanghai, the first of its kind outside of the company's Seattle home. All this, an attempt to convert more Chinese consumers into premium coffee lovers and to stay ahead of strong local competitors.
Starbucks is large. Now, we have to put this into perspective. Starbucks has approximately 5,000 stores in China right now, and a new store is reportedly being opened every 15 hours in China. That's amazing. But if we put it into perspective, they are still the #2 player for coffee in China, and tea consumption still holds well over 50% of the market.
Asia is a very different marketplace. If you go into Manila, you go into Bangkok and any of these cities, a Starbucks costs you serious money for the average middle-class consumer. So a Starbucks visit is a bit more seen as a luxury in those markets. So it's much harder for Starbucks to really capture the mass market.
Starbucks was forced to backtrack on their 2018 projections, now predicting flat to slightly negative growth in China. Competition in the Asian coffee industry has never been stronger, and the current leaders, Starbucks, are coming under pressure at both ends of the market.
We shouldn't forget that Starbucks is facing increasing competition. The markets are increasingly saturated. So that doesn't mean it's opened the doors to as rapid an expansion as it was going through.
You have a lot of competition that really goes into craft cafes, bespoke cafes, very small chains, individual corner shop type of cafes, but it's very hard on scale to move to the same as the craft coffee bars. I don't see Starbucks being effective competing with them.
The rise of independent coffee houses like Suhaimi's Dutch Colony Company in Singapore are an increasingly appealing option for those of us who want an artisan cup.
When it comes down to flavor, that's where it gives us the upper edge. Starbucks is definitely not doing coffee the way that we are. I think the good news for Starbucks is that they start to see the shift of appreciation. They are beginning to actually brew coffee the way the local guys does it, or the way the artisan guys does it.
It also needs to learn from the more of the independent sector. And can Starbucks manage somehow to come across as sympathetic to them and in tune with them without losing its own core expertise and offer?
In an attempt to stay ahead of this competition, Starbucks now tailor new types of drinks exclusively for the Asian market.
There are coffees that are now created specifically for that market. Matcha lattes, which you didn't have in other cities. Flavors around mango, all these things that speak to the localization of preferences. National holidays, Deepavali or Hari Raya, and they work with the national cultures more.
But it's not only the coffee that has gone local, but the design of the cafes. Starbucks employs a global network of architects and artists across 18 different countries. Whether in Japan or China, their brief is to give the global chain's cafes a distinctively individual feel.
Starbucks in China has been localized in a very different sort of way. Rather than catering to the individual with a laptop, Starbucks caters to groups in China. And so the seating arrangements would more easily allow for 4 or 6 people to sit together and share the experience.
But despite this local approach, Starbucks, like any global brand, have to guard against scandals that can instantly become international news. In April 2018, 2 African Americans were arrested in a Starbucks in Philadelphia for waiting in the cafe without purchasing food or drink.
The response really was multifaceted. We had the social media responses, exactly like what we saw with Starbucks in Forbidden City. We saw protesters.
Shut it down! We can't get it! Shut it down!
There was even a call for people to boycott Starbucks. So early on, as we look at those first 24 to 36 hours, this was literally brewing to be a major problem for Starbucks.
Turning down personal compensation of $200,000 US, the two men, Rashon Nelson and Dante Robinson, asked for Starbucks to instead fund a grants program for aspiring entrepreneurs. And closing 8,000 stores across the USA, Starbucks also showed their staff this video.
Lesson time.
Reminding them of the history of racial discrimination in America.
Discrimination against African Americans in public spaces has a long history. In the 1960s, black and white students trying to desegregate buses were firebombed. Black patrons were routinely denied service in restaurants and hotels. Today, discrimination is against the law. It's the people and the systems that support our communities that must follow suit.
Of course, there's a lot of discussion, there are a lot of critics, a lot of naysayers who say you can't train culture, you can't train biases of many types. They may be right, but I think Starbucks did try very hard and did put an honest effort, and I think it pushed the company into the right direction.
スターバックスのバリューの中に入っている、多様性を大事にするということに対しての教育をもう一回しようとしたわけですよね。その2008年でハードシューツがお店を全店閉めたっていうことと同じことをもう一回今回やったわけです。そのハードシューツの DNA というのは今も残ってるんじゃないかなって感じますけどね。
But in June 2018, Starbucks would lose a piece of its DNA for a second time.
Thank you for believing. Thank you for believing in what our core purpose really is. Thank you for believing in each other. Thank you for believing in the company. And thank you for believing in me.
In an emotional farewell ceremony, Schultz announced he would retire as CEO.
It'd be very difficult for me to imagine Starbucks having the same success with a traditional, top-down, authoritarian leader. It would be a very different story if Howard Schultz had that kind of a personality.
Despite the uncertainty caused by Schultz's resignation, the new CEO, Kevin Johnson, announced a record revenue of $6.3 billion in April 2018. Under his leadership, Johnson aims to increase the number of Starbucks stores worldwide by 40% to 37,000. But the challenge will be to manage this growth whilst preserving the heart of the company. Or, as Howard Schultz puts it,
how do you get this big and stay small?
Businesses go out of business. It's part of the natural cycle of things. Starbucks isn't immune from that. What it needs to do is what every surviving brand needs to do. It needs to remain true to its core principles and to the essence of its brand for as long as that is still succeeding.